I'm Patrick Pacheco. Coming up on Theater All the Moving Parts, a chat with actor Cameron Adams of Mrs. Doubtfire about that invaluable member of any cast, the understudy. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Theater All the Moving Parts at the West Bank Cafe on 42nd Street. I'm Patrick Pacheco, and my guest today is Cameron Adams, an ensemble member of the new musical Mrs. Doubtfire, but who on a moment's notice may well step into one of the starring roles. That is because she is an understudy, a role that she has played in such shows as Hairspray, Promises, Promises, and Hello, Dolly. Well, hello, Cameron.
Hi.
It is so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And I'm so looking forward to our discussion
Me
about the understudy. What is an understudy?
An understudy is a person in the ensemble of a cast who covers or understudies one of the leading actors.
And in Mrs. Doubtfire, you're covering the Miranda Hillard
Yeah, that's right.
role,
Yeah.
which is the role that Sally Field played in the movie.
Yes.
How did you end up becoming an understudy in the first place?
Sometimes you have no choice. No, I'm one of those rare actors who does not mind understudying. It's not everybody's cup of tea all of the time. On my very first Broadway show, I understudied a very small part, and so it was a really nice sort of introduction into what that world is. And since then, I've done it in more shows than not that I've done here in New York. And you jump in and you just say yes, I feel like a lot of the time. But it wasn't something that I think when I first moved to New York and I was fairly young, I didn't realize it was something I would strive to do, but now I love doing it.
What are your obligations when you come through the stage door?
Right, that's the tricky part, is every day you have to be prepared just in case. So even if there are no planned outs, even if someone doesn't have a personal day or you don't think they're sick or any of that, you have to be ready to go on at any time. So if I walk through the stage door, I'm ready to do my ensemble part, and then I'm also ready to go on for Miranda if necessary.
What are the qualities that make a good understudy?
Someone who's good at doing their homework. And I think a person who is capable of sitting back and watching and listening without taking up too much space, so that the actual company member who plays that role has an opportunity to really feel like they can dive in without eyes on them, right? And I guess I'll stress again, doing your homework. So going home last night, I went home, I iced my feet, I poured a glass of wine, and I opened up my script, and I just kept drilling lines and going over lines with my boyfriend, who reluctantly helps me out. Yeah.
I count that you've been an understudy in 8 productions.
That sounds right.
You've also been a swing in 2 productions.
Yes.
And double duty. Before we get into the idea of what's the difference between an understudy and a swing, what's the difference between an understudy and a standby?
An understudy, like myself, is on stage generally, or could be potentially a swing, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But a standby, their one job is to just be off stage and ready to go on for that role. So they have their own dressing room usually, or they share with someone else who's another standby, and they are in the theater without an onstage role or track, like what we say. We call that a track. And they'll be off stage ready to go on at any moment.
Some of the famous standbys in history, in Broadway history, was Elaine Stritch was a standby
That's right.
for Ethel Merman in Call Me Madam. Never went on. Lainey Kazan was a standby for Barbra Streisand in Funny Girl. Never went on. So in what role did you go on most often?
I had the great fortune of covering the incredible Kelly O'Hara in Nice Work If You Can Get It at the Imperial Theater. And she, because she is Kelly O'Hara, had many, many concerts and engagements lined up throughout the year. And so I got very fortunate, and I was able to go on, I think, was over 25 times. And that is not always the case, you know. There have been certain shows where I have not gone on because the show didn't run long enough or because the person never missed. And in that case, I was very lucky because it was probably until now my favorite role I've ever played and the thing I've enjoyed doing the most on stage.
And that was Billy
Bendix.
Billy Bendix.
Yeah.
And obviously, when an understudy goes on, there is a slip of paper in the
Yeah.
playbills,
Yes.
or there's an announcement by the stage manager.
Yeah.
The role of Billy Bendix,
Yeah.
usually played,
Yeah.
will be now played by you.
Yeah, no pressure.
And, how do you feel when you hear the stage manager's announcement?
That's a great question because we always joke. I mean, if you cover someone like Kelly O'Hara, obviously people are excited to see Kelly O'Hara, which I totally understand. And when a brunette comes out instead of a blonde, but you know, I try to just not even think about it. And my job is to go out there and be there with the rest of my cast and hopefully do a good enough job that we get into the groove of things and they don't even realize that it's different. Or if they do realize it's different, that it feels great and it feels natural and they know that when I'm on, they can trust me.
And do you ever sense that you've won over the audience, whatever their resistance may be at the beginning?
I actually have a great story about
Yes,
that.
please.
I was on for Kelly and I had done it a few times. At this point, I was pretty comfortable. And towards the end of the show, she sings this very sad duet with Matthew Broderick. And she's leaving town, and the way it's set up is she's actually sitting on a little, almost like a plank above the orchestra pit. She's sitting there with her backpack, and she's singing out into the audience, and she sings the last note, and it goes dark, and the people applaud, and you have to climb down a little ladder into the orchestra pit. And a lady leaned over to me during the applause and said, "You're doing a great job." And I said, "Thank you." I kept going down the ladder and finished the show. So that felt pretty good.
That does feel good. It
Yeah,
must
you know,
have.
you feel it. It depends. It depends how comfortable you get out there. You know, it's certainly not always the case. I covered Rosemary at How to Succeed and got to go on many times for that as well. And that one, I went on a ton, but it was spread out just enough that it never felt, I always was really having to think about it and be very conscious of what I was doing. Whereas with Billy at Nice Work If You Can Get It, I actually felt like I could sort of let go and enjoy what I was doing.
And you
out
went
there.
on, as you said, opposite Matthew Broderick.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And you also went on opposite Daniel Radcliffe.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In How to Succeed.
Yeah.
Do you have conversations with these actors? I'm going on. I'm going to be different.
Yeah.
What do we need to do?
Yeah,
if
always.
anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the gig too, right? Is making sure that you show up and look at them and say, "What do you need from me? Is there anything very specific other than, of course, I'm going to hit my marks and where I'm supposed to be and sing the notes and do the things, but what else do you need from me? Is there something specific?" And that's a question I like to ask whoever I'm opposite with, which would be Rob McClure in this show. And those two gentlemen that you just mentioned, I worked with Matthew before when I was younger, and so I already had a relationship with him. And Daniel Radcliffe, if you don't already know this, I'm sure you do, is one of the kindest, nicest people I have ever had the pleasure of working with. And so he was so excited when an understudy went on, like genuinely excited. And I did the part of Billy in Nice Work with Matthew enough that we sort of got our own thing going. Like we sort of developed our own little thing, which was really nice.
A different chemistry.
A little
then.
bit of a different chemistry. It was a little bit different, which was nice.
What are some of the answers that you do get from actors that you're going to be starring opposite or featured opposite?
Right. This depends on the person. Most people are, in my past experience, excited for a little bit of change. Now, that is usually if the show has been open and running for long enough that everybody's like really comfortable doing what they're doing. I don't know if everyone would feel that way at this point in a rehearsal process for, say, Mrs. Doubtfire. But I think in my past experience, most people have been really open to me doing my version of what it is because, like I said, I think there's a trust there in knowing that my job is to do what is truthful in the show and what the lead actress or supporting actress, whoever I cover, has created, whatever she has created for the character.
So you're basically saying it's not a copycat, it's not a replica of whatever she created.
Right.
You are allowed, to a certain extent, I suppose,
yeah.
to make it your own.
Yeah, a little bit.
And does that start at the very beginning? Because the minute you're cast, you are working with the director or choreographer himself or herself or their self.
Right.
And you learn everything, correct? You from the very beginning of it. And then you can, I guess the question I'm asking is, how much can you improvise?
Oh, probably no improvising,
No.
but unless it's called for in the show, unless it's like there's space for it, it's written in as something that you can individualize. But no, and it is one of those things. Usually, right in the beginning, if you're lucky enough, as I have been to be at the beginning of a rehearsal process and start at the very beginning, you do get a little more information because you are in the room with the director and the choreographer, and you are hearing them. But oftentimes, if I'm like I do for most of my jobs, I'm in the ensemble. So there are times where I'm in another room learning a dance number or learning some music, and then I have to sort of play catch up.
And once the show opens, do you basically have conversations with the stage manager in terms of going on?
Yes, sometimes there's also a resident director or a resident choreographer who is involved and they're around, but 9 times out of 10, the stage managers who you correspond with and who lets you know if you're going on or if you're, on standby to go on or anything like that.
We mentioned earlier, obviously, that you played swing in 2 shows, and sometimes you play both swing and understudy, as I think you did in Hairspray.
Yep.
Tell us, what is a swing? And you mentioned the word track, and I'm not sure anybody knows what that means.
Yeah, so the word track is a lingo that we use that just means part. It's what your part is, what your character's part and journey is through the show. And so if you've got 6 ensemble women and I'm ensemble woman number 5, that's my track in the show. And if you're a swing, your job is to be off stage and understudy everyone in the ensemble.
Everyone?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that takes a lot of concentration.
Does, to say the least, it does. I always say that it is the hardest job in the building. Maybe unless you're playing Hamlet. But no, I always say that that's like the hardest job in the theater. And especially for a big musical, a lot of people don't realize that there's multiple people off stage who are ready to go on for different ensemble characters at any moment.
What do you like about it? What do you like about being a swing?
I don't love being a swing, which is why I haven't done it for a very long time. That's not true. I actually didn't hate being a swing. I decided shortly thereafter, I did it a few times. I decided it wasn't for me, but and that I would prefer not doing that if possible. But it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're ready to you have to have a certain personality. It's the type of person that can sit back and go, okay, I'm going out there. This might not be perfect or what I imagine perfect to be, but I'm going to hit my marks and I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to be where I'm supposed to be and have the right prop and hand it off to the right person and like all of that, it takes a certain type of personality.
Disciplined and detail-oriented because you don't want to bump into another dancer.
No, it happens. It happens. And we just try to cover it up.
And when it does happen, they've got your back, I'm sure.
Oh my God. Anyone on stage that is on stage with, and if they're not, then they probably have never been a swing before or an understudy before.
Right.
And I always say, everyone, I do tell a lot of younger performers, I do suggest swinging if it's possible and available to them in a show, swinging at least one time in their career, because it does give you an appreciation and an understanding of how incredibly difficult that job is.
What is it that you like about being an understudy?
I love getting the opportunity to learn a role and play a character and get out there. And I always think of, a lot of people don't look at actors this way and as a performer on Broadway in particular, I look at what we do on Broadway as a team sport. It really is. And even if you're Matthew Broderick or Kelly O'Hara or Rob McClure, it's a team sport and it wouldn't happen without everyone. So for me, I really enjoy getting that opportunity to go on and do something totally different with my fellow castmates in a different way. And I sort of like the challenge, I like that, I have to go home and I have to think about it and I have to be present, and it makes me really stay on top of my responsibilities going into work every day.
What's the downside?
Downside is it's not yours fully, right? And that's hard. You know, it's not for everyone. Like I said, it's certainly not for everyone. So it isn't fully yours. You know, you don't get to take it and mold it exactly how you would imagine it, which is tricky for some people. For me, it works out okay.
How familiar are you with the legendary stories of understudies on Broadway?
Not as familiar as I would like to be.
Well, the most famous one is Shirley MacLaine.
Right.
Shirley MacLaine was the understudy in Pajama Games for Carol Haney. She never went on, and she quit. She actually quit. And just as she was coming back to tell the production that she had quit, she was met at the door by George Abbott and the choreographer and everybody else saying, "You're on tonight."
Oh my goodness.
So she was on, and Hal Wallace, a Hollywood producer, happened to be in the audience and signed her to a contract, and that kicked off her Hollywood career.
And that was her whole career.
And,
wow.
and there are other ones as well, Bernadette Peters and Patina Miller, Matthew Morrison, Cheyenne Jackson, and again, more recently, Sutton Foster, who was the understudy in San Diego for Thoroughly Modern Millie.
Right.
And the original person walked, and they put her in, and
that's right.
She wanted
Changed her
Tony.
career. Yeah.
Changed her career. How strategic is the choice on your part to be an understudy in terms of your career?
I think what ends up happening, I've been doing this now for over 20 years, so I'm just in a different place in my life. And I think 9 times out of 10 when I walk into an audition for a show, people know that I'm there to do a couple of different things. They can put me in a couple of different places. And I think with the understudy route, that is part of that. Because I have done it many times, I do think a lot of times if I'm auditioning for a show, that is something that they're aware of and that is something that they have in their mind. Not always. The show I did before this one was the revival of My Fair Lady. Yeah, and I did not cover anything there. You know, I just did me. I just had to do me, which was in a way kind of nice for a minute. I did enjoy that, I won't lie. But I also have sort of made a choice that if I'm going in to audition for a show, I want there either to be a really fun feature in it, or I get to understudy something fantastic that I'm excited about.
Yeah, that kind of led me to my next question was, how do you decide when you choose to be an understudy and you don't choose to be an understudy? And I think there are times when you've turned it down.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice because look, it's a tough business. So sometimes it's like, great, I got a job and they want me to cover 3 roles and I will have to figure this out, you know. I've never had to do that, thankfully. I have friends that have had to do that, but, so sometimes it's not a choice. And that is also hard, obviously, because you know that if you are to say yes to this job, then this is what goes along with that. This is the responsibility that is attached to that. So it depends. You know, I feel like I'm just sort of getting to a point in my career where I'm allowed to go, I don't think I want to go in for that, or I'm not ready to go in for that audition, or I'm not interested in going in for that audition. But that's a newer feeling for me, honestly. And sometimes it's just dependent on my body and how it feels. Dancing.
Well, it's in great shape. You're in great shape. How many rehearsals do you feel, Cameron, that you have to have under your belt in order to be confident to go out?
It just depends on the show, because if you're doing a revival, it's basically set. Besides a few small changes here and there that whatever estate is granting you the possibility to do the show has said, you can change this or you can fix this and, move this around. So the thing about a revival is you're going in and you know what it is.
Yeah.
And so those are the lines. This is the music. So with something like that, I think it comes a little bit easier. Because obviously you can look stuff up online. You can listen to a soundtrack over and over again. But if you're working on a new musical, it changes all the time. We're getting new script pages right now every single day. We're getting changes every single day. So that's scarier.
I'm sure.
There's less. So I don't know if I could give you a specific amount of time. I have been very lucky, and I probably shouldn't say this out loud. I've been very lucky, and I've had plenty of time to learn a part. Even if I've gone on early on in previews or the run of the show, I've had plenty of time to learn it. But I have friends who haven't been so lucky.
And do you have to fit into the costumes and fit the wig and everything? Exactly.
It depends the show. Not always, no. It just depends on the show. If the costumes are very expensive, and very specific, like a lot of time period pieces and things like that, where the costumes cost a lot more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then
Sometimes.
you've got to fit
Oftentimes you do. And then in other cases, no. You know, like at Mrs. Doubtfire right now, I know I have some of my own pieces, and I have a few of Jen's pieces if she were to call out and I were to go on. So it just depends on the show.
What are some of the most hair-raising experiences you've had as an understudy?
Well, you know, you forget song lyrics.
Uh-huh.
The first or second time I ever went on for Kelly at Nice Work If You Can Get It, she starts singing Someone to Watch Over Me.
Uh-huh.
So no pressure, just a super iconic song that everyone knows that normally Kelly O'Hara sings. And she's a bootlegger in the show, and one of her friends runs out with a gun, hands her a gun. She cocks the gun and continues to sing the song. It's very funny. And my friend, Chris Sullivan, handed the gun to me, said the line, and the gun fell into two pieces. And I was like, that's actually one of those times where I felt like the audience sort of like had my back after that. They were like, okay, this is poor kids out there trying to sing a song and, you know, her prop broke. But it you know, you make it work and you keep going. And I've also fallen. I mean, I've fallen center stage while singing, and, you know, it happens. I'll tell you one thing. If you get very comfortable, or at least for me, I have very little ego when it comes to, you know, embarrassing myself at certain times. Because if you can embarrass yourself in front of like 2,000 people, then, you know, you can let a lot of stuff roll off your back.
And the most rewarding aspect of what you do?
It feels incredible to do that on a stage, to go out there and step into someone else's shoes for an evening or two and to sing those songs and transform into a different character that you don't get to play. You know, it's why we become actors. It's really rewarding.
And I gather it's harder to be swing than an understudy.
I think so. There's less, you know, it's not that you do it for the glory, but there is less of that moment of like the big bow at the end of the night. And you know, you get more of that from your fellow cast members and your crew members and your stage management team and your wardrobe team, you know, when you get off stage. It's more of that as a swing. The goal is to not know that anything is different for the audience.
And what is the most frustrating thing?
You're hard on yourself.
Oh.
You know, you want to get it right. So I think the frustrating part is not feeling like, if you don't get to do it enough, you never get that feeling of like, oh my God, that felt great. I just was in the pocket. I was in the groove. It felt really easy and fun and you know, easy, I guess is the right word.
And have you ever had to go on in mid-performance?
I have.
Oh, tell us about that.
I have. At Hairspray, actually, before I did the show on Broadway, I was actually in the ensemble on the national tour, and the girl who played Amber Von Tussle got sick mid-performance. And so at intermission, we were quickly changing me over into that like huge blonde wig and all of her crazy costumes. And so I jumped in about halfway through for that one, which was fine. For that part, actually, it was fairly easy. She had done sort of all of the hard work at that point, but it was still nerve-wracking and scary.
And the adrenaline pumping.
Oh gosh,
as well.
The adrenaline is like through the roof.
I was interviewing Anne Reinking at the time of when she was in Chicago, and she said, I better watch my coffee. And I thought, well, I've never heard that term before.
I love that.
Have you ever heard that term before?
No, I love it.
I better watch my coffee because, you know, my understudy might poison me and to go on.
Oh, God.
This is a joke question, but have you ever been tempted to poison anybody's coffee?
No, thank goodness. I've actually always covered women that, I think with the exception of one, that I already knew, which is sort of interesting. And love. And I consider most of the women I've covered very, you know, dear friends of mine. So it's, I have a large respect for the beautiful women I've covered on Broadway.
Dream role? And I suppose we might have to talk about a revival perhaps.
Right.
But dream role for you, because you could probably play anything.
I have always wanted to play Millie in Thoroughly Modern Millie. I love that show so much. I would love to get another opportunity to play Billy in Nice Work If You Can Get It. That ended up being something for me that I realized was like one of my most favorite roles I've ever learned and gotten to play. Honestly, Roxy in Chicago. I know everyone says that, but I would love to play Roxy in Chicago, and I would love to play Charity in Sweet Charity.
Great. So all you casting directors out there, Please take note. We have to wrap up. You obviously went through Mrs. Doubtfire through the whole COVID experience. I think you had 3 previews prior to shut down, and now you're back up and at it again.
Yeah.
Coming back to Miranda was like riding a bicycle?
Yes and no. As I was saying before, because it's a new musical, it's changing so much.
Oh, right. Yes.
So I think there are like 3 scenes that are the same. Everything else is totally different. And luckily, Jen Gambatese, who plays the role of Miranda, is a dear and older friend of mine. We've known each other basically since I moved to New York. And so it's very easy to understudy her. And she's one of those super kind women who comes over and says, this changed, by the way. And just to give you a heads up, this is different. It's
nice camaraderie.
100%. 100%.
That's just great.
And she's been an understudy before, so she gets it.
Well, Jen, we hope nothing happens to you. Right. We hope you are in good health, but you get a pilot or something, and get to see Cameron. And that there's going to be a producer, a Hollywood producer in the audience, and there's going to be, a Broadway producer.
That's
and says, where has this woman been all my life? Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you more fascinating conversations with artists and thought leaders as New York theater, The Fabulous Invalid, regains its invaluable place in American culture. I'm Patrick Pacheco.